Hey guys, welcome back to Learning Lore with PlanetHead. This series is going to be a long series, hopefully. I'm going to try to keep this intro short because I'm going to be adding this to a playlist. This is actually the first video I've made, but in this project, but it may end up being down the road as far as the playlist. If you want to check out the playlist as it grows, I'm going to be putting each episode in chronological order as far as the history goes, as far as the lore is. Starting off the lore, and this will take quite some time, going through each one of the EVE Online pages lore area. If you want to check those out, you can always go to the EVE universe.eveonline./lore. I'm going to be starting off here and just going through each one of these that pertains to something that might be interesting. If you want to check out why this playlist is made, please feel free to check out the description. There will be a playlist there with an intro at the beginning of it explaining what this is for. So without further ado, let's just dive right into the 25ers. Basically, I'm going to be going through the lore that they have written and anything that I can find along the way. So I'll be reading it kind of word for word, but as I find interesting things that I want to delve into, which I actually don't know everything, I thought, why don't I just read it, and then if I hit certain spots, I can just kind of dig a little bit deeper, and you can kind of come along for the ride if you're interested. So we're going to start off here. First off, got to get my coffee in me. Okay, so the 25ers, I'm just going to read the first paragraph here. The 25ers were a group of biologists and sociologists, and when the need for a standardized time throughout New Eden was identified, they claimed that the only measurement worth considering in the spacefaring age was that of the human body. The internal body clock of humans is close to 25 hours, and thus they wanted to base that new clock on that measurement. Now, what does that mean? Basically, if you think about it, our Earth rotates around the planet a certain number of days. Rotates around the sun a certain number of days. It also rotates a certain number of hours. So we go by a 24-hour clock, a 365 and 66 day year. Now, if you think about that, digging a little bit deeper, if you've got all these different systems and planets and regions, each planet is going to have its own way to judge time. The 25ers, so if I were on a planet, just keep it in our solar system, Earth, and I said year one, and I was talking to somebody who was on Jupiter, who was on year one, it may take, and I'm not a scientist, it may take 20 years, 300 years for Jupiter to get, of Earth years, for Jupiter to get all the way around the sun. So, and then it may be rotating faster or slower than what the Earth is doing. So when you're talking about multiple regions, multiple solar systems, how does one group communicate with another group so that time is the same? So they can say, hey, let's meet on a Wednesday. My Wednesday might be different from your Wednesday. So if they adopted one specific way of tracking time, then that would be their way of keeping track of everything and getting everything ordered. The 25ers said their goal was to keep it at 25 hours because the human body is regulated on a 25-hour system. Another group called, I think, the Traditionalists, and we'll probably get into those down the road, wanted to go with the old Earth 24-hour clock. And then I think there's the mathematicians had another way that they wanted to go. So there were three major groups. The 25ers, when they were created, were a group of, like I said here, biologists and sociologists who wanted the clocks to be done by 25 hours. So let's go a little bit farther into here. And the 25er, their origins were 25ers were a small Galente grassroots organization led by the energetic young man by the name of Karab Rasul, although he preferred the pseudonym The Astrologer. So going forward, we'll be referring to him as The Astrologer, not Karab Rasul. But he was the leader of the 25ers. Through the efforts of The Astrologer, the 25ers gained great public support, spurred on by the surprisingly big network put into place by the astrologer. So the astrologer was able to create a huge network of things, of people, to get this idea of a 25-hour daily clock. They lost the campaign to have the 25-hour clock introduced at the Yule Conference to the traditionalists. I talked about them earlier. The traditionalists were the ones that want to go with the 24-hour clock. Now, I know this might not seem like a huge deal, but in reality, it kind of is. It's like, who will put their stamp on the rest of time in my book, which is kind of cool. From then on, you would be in charge of that. So the 25ers were originally created for that purpose, but the traditionalists actually won out and the 24-hour clock was done. And they were still led by the astrologers. So what do you do when you create this huge organization, but then you don't get something passed that you want? Let's say, I'm trying to think of something, like a political party. The Reform Party back in the early 90s. Don't kill me for not knowing my politics, but was created by Ross Perot. He created a big organization to try to gain power on the U.S. presidency. And after that, even though he didn't get presidency, that party continued to be around for quite some time. So there's an inference to here. So that's where the astrologer and the 25ers started from. Now, what happened after the Yule Conference? Now, the Yule Conference isn't named for a system. I actually was thinking about that. I was trying to look up. It wasn't that. It was an actual ship called the Yule, and that's where this conference took place on. Maybe we'll get into that down the road, but that's where that comes from. So post-Yule activities. So what happened after this vote was done? Well, let me drink my coffee real quick, and we're going to look into it. So, after the Yule Conference, might as well pull this up here. After the Yule Conference, Karab Rasul, or the astrologer, decided to use his group's influence for other causes. At that time, spaceship owners were required to pay huge amounts of money each year for their spaceship license. This was something that all of the empires, all four of the major empires, enforced, as it provided a good deal of income for them, along with ensuring that only the cream of society could afford to be in space business. Of course, this also hampered space trade and made it difficult for the average Joe to go into space. So in other words, your nice little, back in the day, your nice little Merlin here that I had here that I got for free, I would have to pay a yearly fee for that. And now if you kind of think about that, the 25ers, part of that, if there was a 25-day hour day, there'd be a little bit of a percentage of a save there. But basically, the astrologer, Karab Rasul, had created this large group. They didn't get what they wanted passed, so they refocused their efforts against this idea of somebody having to pay basically a tax or a license every year for a ship. These prices were very high, so it only allowed certain people to be able to fly spaceships. The astrologer and his organization, still called the 25ers, even though they weren't really doing a 25-hour thingy, started lobbying for a change in the legislation. Since Concord was responsible for using ship licenses, the collecting of the license fees, it became a target of the demonstrations organized by the 25ers. Now, in this article, it doesn't actually point out where Concord is, but I am going to pull up .lan here. There's .lan. And if I remember correctly, we're going to go to the universe. And it's talking about the, it's going to be talking about where the, where Concord is based out of. Now, if I remember correctly, it's either Essence, Verge Vendor, or Every Shore. I'm going to go with Verge Vendor. We're going to try that one. Nope, it wasn't that one. See, Essence maybe? I don't think it's this one. No, it was the last one, of course. Every Shore? Okay, maybe I'm completely wrong. Genesis. There it is. Basically, Concord's base systems are in the region of Genesis. You can see up here, all of these systems up here are controlled by Genesis, if you are controlled by Concord, if you ever want to go check them out. I'm sure they probably have some weird things going on there. I've never really spent a whole lot of time there, but it's actually interesting to me just to see it, and that's what these videos are about. I actually live, one of my main characters lives in Iridia right down this way, so I might just sneak over there and check it out every once in a while. But this is the region that we're going to be talking about. At first, Concord ignored the protests, so this large organization of the 25ers was protesting against licenses now. They had moved on from the 25-hour clock. So Concord ignored the protests, but as they became more serious, it began taking notice. As it had been recently reformed, Concord was concerned about the image it was projecting to the public, and the committee was formed to handle the matter. As is often the case, things dragged on for months. All the while, the astrologer, the head of the 25ers, was planning more and more outrageous acts of protest, even going so far to organize general strikes on some planets. So basically, this group, while they lost something, they created a large group, and he was able to organize that entire group to start striking or stopping production on specific planets, which I'm sure was not good, especially being a Galente-formed group, which is a democratic. If you don't know, the Galente are kind of your democratic faction in Eve. Concord is more of your corporate faction. The Amar is basically your imperial faction, and then the Minmatar are your kind of rebel alliance faction in my mind. Maybe that's why they put the Rifter in there. But in general, he had started organizing protests, and they got bigger and bigger. The icing on the cake of these protests came during the first New Year celebration, celebrating YC1. So literally, within a year of them not getting the 25-hour clock, they had a protest that happened, YC1. That's where your years in the Eve come from, at the headquarters of Concord. So we're talking one of these systems here. I'm not exactly sure the exact. It doesn't have it listed here on the headquarters. So we got to figure that out at some point. Maybe if I would have done my research, I could tell you. The astrologer then managed to infiltrate the station's defense perimeter with a lone unmanned cargo ship filled with explosives, which he then promptly detonated outside the station in plain view of many of New Eden's most prominent people. So in other words, he waited until this huge celebration of year one, basically New Year's Day, where it was being in the largest place he could find. Maybe Jita wasn't as big as it was. This is where Concord was. And basically blew up a ship. The astrologer was careful not to blow the ship up so close as to injure any of the guests, but his message was heard loud and clear. 2 months later, new Concord legislation came abolishing the license fees was passed to the member states. So Concord, 2 months after this, basically rescinded the licenses that they had been collecting and left it up to the major races, which, from what you can tell in EVE right now, there are no licensing fees. So the later years of the 25ers, the astrologer, now a fugitive after his stunt, quickly became a living legend. The 25ers organization was dismantled, and the astrologer lost his status as the champion of the people. But his name is not forgotten, nor the 25ers. And every now and then a new group is formed somewhere in the world of New Eden, proclaiming itself to be the successor of the old 25ers, dreaming of reliving the times of the little men defeated the big guns. So, basically, the 25ers as the originator are no longer around. Let's take a quick look and see if any players have tried to, I think it's Eve who? Eve who home. There we go. I'm wondering if anybody's ever created their own 25ers group. Eve who will give you an idea of the different largest corporations, largest alliances, but I'm just going to look here. So there isn't a alliance or corporation, from what I can tell, named the 25ers, so I'm kind of surprised by that. Let's try just the words. 25. So it's out there. If somebody wanted to bring this up, they could go by the old lore and try to bring up some sort of, I would go Galente along those lines. But basically, that is the history of the 25ers. There's a lot more involved with this. There's things about the traditionalists, the Galente, obviously Concord, and those hopefully will be in later episodes. But yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and end this video now, but put it in the playlist. I want to keep these beginnings and endings of these videos short, because if somebody's watching the playlist, I don't want them to have to hear me talk about the same thing over and over again. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully I'll have a new one sometime later on this week. I'm just going to go right down the line of each one of these articles. If they're worthwhile, I'll read them prior to the video that I do, but I'm not going to overindulge. I kind of like looking up things as I'm going along. So I'll do a little bit of research, but I'm sure as I go along. That said, when I get done with all these articles at some point, I'll dig even deeper. And I know there's sites out there. I've already talked about this. So that's it. Hey guys, fly safe, fly dangerously, fly however you want, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day.